So, we're here talking about gaming video, but sometimes certain games are fun to play, and sometimes they aren't fun to watch. And so I thought we would have kind of an open discussion about different styles of games, and what is entertaining in game video, and why sometimes your favorite games might not translate well to the screen. So why don't we go ahead and introduce our panel. I'll let them introduce themselves.
My name is John Bain. I run a channel called Cynical Brit. I'm better known on the internet as Total Biscuit, a fact that I regret to this day.
Hi, I'm David Moss. I'm known as Lasercorn, and I'm on a channel called Smosh Games.
I'm Matt Sohinki, and I'm called Sohinki because it is my last name, and I am also on Smosh Games.
Hey guys, I'm Shane Burris. I go by Shivy2142, and I work at Machinima with Hundar here, and we manage and operate Machinima Realm.
Brett Hunley, Hundar, Machinima Realm.
So what kind of games are your favorite to play?
MOBAs. I'm a big MOBA fan. I've always been into Dota pretty much since its inception in original Warcraft, and those actually aren't always the most fun to watch, so it'll be interesting to talk about that.
I've been a sucker for loot lately. Just anything loot. Just like a lot of Diablo lately. Loot, loot, loot.
I've been really into roguelikes lately, especially ones like that randomize and keep it fresh like that. A lot of fun stuff, like Rogue Legacy was really good for me personally.
Any kind of competitive multiplayer game of any description, whether it be Dota, whether it be competitive FPS, competitive RTS, anything that allows me to beat the snot out of somebody, usually, or more often than not get the snot beaten out of me. Anything like that that doesn't involve too much teamwork.
I really like a lot of the open world games lately. GTA 5, obviously. I had a lot of fun with the Assassin's Creed Black Flag. You can murder Shamu in that game, which is weird. So that was an interesting moment. So yeah, open world stuff.
So you've said the kind of games that you like to play. Have you ever filmed anything, and then when it came out, you're like, this isn't going to work. We can't release this. This doesn't look good.
About 95% of my Dota games probably go that way. Dota in particular is something that obviously these guys have played as well and probably know just how boring it can be, especially in the first 15 minutes. League of Legends has the same problem. It's this weird situation where you're playing a game that's both competitive multiplayer and also PvE in the sense that you have to farm a lot in order to be effective, which means you have got to be very, very interesting in the first 10 to 15 minutes of that video. And sometimes those games can drag on so long you literally run out of things to say. You've got nothing interesting to talk about. It's like, well, I last hit that minion. Yeah, that was pretty good, wasn't it? Yeah. And you just realize at that point, this is junk. This has no business being on the internet.
Yeah, there are those games. I put up a game recently, and then I regretted it, where I was playing as Lifestealer, and I did really well. I had like 800 gold per minute or something crazy, and I ended up the game like 14-0. I was like, oh, this is gonna be a great video. And then when I rewatched it after I posted, I was like, I spent 30 minutes farming and doing nothing. And I was like, yeah, just last hitting creeps here, so that's cool.
Yeah, we have that same problem. I tend to bring Shibby into my games just because, like, worst case, if it's just a long farming session, it'll just turn like non sequitur, sort of. Like, we might as well be doing anything, but
Right.
it at least sort of staves off some of that sometimes.
I've been struggling with Hearthstone as well,
Yeah.
as far as making it interesting, as far as personality and what's going on the screen.
Yeah,
But,
I find that difficult too.
if League of Legends match is going poorly, it's just like, all right, delete. Stop DX story.
Yeah, you can usually tell about, at least halfway through it. It's like,
Funnily enough, I found Hearthstone fairly easy as long as you just don't shut up. I think that helps an awful lot. Because you've got the weird idea of where you're trying to make your turn and actually make your play and not screw it up.
Yeah.
Then you've got their turn where you're sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah.
At which point you can say, well, you know what? I probably did this horribly wrong. Then spend about 2 minutes explaining why you're awful, and then you get to play again. And there's this weird rhythm that starts to come out of that, where you commentate your own play, and then you commentate either the reaction to that or what you think the opponent's going to do. But I can certainly see any game that's turn-based in that way becoming just a void of commentary where you have no idea what to say before you're able to do something again. And then you just revert to play-by-play, and at that point you might as well just not be talking. So I played this card. Yeah, we see that, but you say it anyway because you feel like you need to kind of fill that void.
I've found when I play Hearthstone that I I play better when I'm recording, because a lot of times I just make these split-second decisions when I'm just playing, but when I'm recording, I actually talk out loud
It
my
slows you
entire
down.
thought process
Yeah.
and say, like, what I can do versus what they might do, and I end up playing better. So.
Yeah, I don't actually play Hearthstone on my channel because I've seen the comments on his
Oh,
video,
jeez.
and
Thanks a lot.
the armchair, the kind of backseat guys who, with 20/20 hindsight, who know every move you should have made in the comments.
The worst.
Like, yeah, and they won't shut up. They're like, well, what you should have done. And it's like, well, what you should do is shut up. 'Cause we don't want to hear your opinion.
Hearthstone may be the worst game for that I've ever seen in my life.
You have
Yeah.
lethal damage.
I can't imagine. It's like, well, you could have killed him 20 seconds earlier. It doesn't matter. He's still dead. He's dead. I won. That's all that matters. Like, you go 12-2 in an arena. It's like, you could have made that 12-0 with this. And like, yeah, but you didn't know that. I didn't know that. You only know it because you just watched the game in the past. You amazing time-traveling wizard, you. Why aren't you doing arena at this point? You'd be rolling in gold and epics. But yeah, I don't know what it is about Hearthstone that actually brings the backseat gamers out more than any other game.
That's bad.
But strangely enough, it's one of those games you would think wouldn't be that fun to watch, and yet it's maintained an audience to this day. Crip's still getting 20,000+ concurrents on Twitch. Playing that, Trump's still getting 20K. My videos are still pulling in 200,000 on Hearthstone alone. It's ridiculous. You should be bored of this by now. What's going on? I don't get it.
I think a lot of it comes down to how easy the game is to understand.
Yeah.
So the downfall of Dota is someone that has never played Dota or a MOBA in general will watch it, and regardless of how well you're describing what's happening, they'll have no idea what's going on at all. And Hearthstone is a game where there's a lot of strategy involved, but someone can also very easily see it's like, okay, that creature has 3 attack and 3 toughness, and very easily understand why it died and the strategy behind what you're doing. So.
Yeah, I think Dota games in particular have so much going on under the hood, where it's like, well, you got more kills than him, so why didn't you win? It's because that's not how the game works.
Right.
I think Heroes of the Storm is a really interesting change in that, because it's simultaneously, I think, easier to understand from a visual standpoint, and yet blows your mind as to how you could have possibly lost. You win every team fight and then get rolled. And like, what happened? Well, in the background, they just took 2 objectives and just wrecked you. And that can happen, and I wonder when that game actually comes out whether it will be more watchable or less. Right now, I've been quite surprised by how few people are actually watching Heroes. You'd think it would be, I know a lot of people were banking on it being their next big earner when it came to Twitch, and it's bombed in that respect. It's not getting the viewership.
Well, and that's an interesting point. You brought up that you feel like a lot of your Dota content isn't interesting, but League of Legends, is it still the #1 game on Twitch?
I mean, if one of the pro streamers are playing.
If it's not the #1 game on Twitch, it's still one of the #1 most played games in the world. So.
Although it's worth pointing out that when it is #1 on Twitch, it's because it's inflated by a very, very small cadre of extremely popular pro player streamers. When Odd One goes on and pulls 50K, or when Voyboy goes on and pulls 50K, that skews the numbers badly. The smaller LoL streams are barely getting anything.
Right.
There's just a tiny, tiny portion of people that are just really, really good at explaining their game, and also very good at putting on the plays. And even then, you still don't necessarily see what's going on as a team, because you're only seeing it from their perspective.
Right.
Like, if you watch it from a team perspective, if you don't have very competent commentators, that game's nigh on impossible to understand for most people.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that material translate to YouTube? I mean, if people are watching these competitive gamers live, wouldn't being able to skip to the end be a valuable thing? Is that translating to YouTube at all?
Sorry, go ahead.
I guess you want to see the plays be made and see, like, what did this guy do with this character to become so powerful that he won the game or carried it by himself. So you like seeing the team fights and seeing, like, oh, they secured Dragon at 13 minutes and that really got them ahead in items and were able to then roll the team in this mid lane and take the first turret. So
Yeah, being able to deconstruct it, I think for sure, is like all the strength of the stuff that, at least for our content on YouTube, is like we break it down and doing things like that where you can treat it like, a sports, a sports approach where it's like, follow this player as he makes this through this move. And there's just stuff you can't necessarily always do live to sort of help what you were saying,
Yeah, definitely from a casting point of view. I mean, at that point, it becomes less of a kind of first-person stream. It becomes more kind of esports content, which is definitely viable, but on YouTube, esports content doesn't really do that well. I know StarCraft started out being really popular on YouTube with Husky and HD just owning everything. They had the lion's share of the market. Now, YouTube content for StarCraft is... has declined to the point where it's barely even viable, but the tournaments are still pulling big numbers live. So it was like you initially got this big swell of people who were okay watching VODs, and now everyone wants to watch it live. I think to some degree that's even affected YouTube as well. All the videos I see that are popular from League or Dota are either like top 5 plays of the week or machinima pieces, like actual like in-game filming using the source filmmaker, or just really funny moments or fails or anything like that.
Yeah, I think part of it stems from the fact that sometimes you can't trust what you're watching when you're watching a video on YouTube, whereas if I'm just watching like Dendy's stream, I know that's Dendy. But a lot of people will try to like be like, Dendy plays Pudge on YouTube, and then it's just them playing Pudge with the tag that says Dendy. So
yeah, that's a fair point actually. I never really considered like authenticity matters a lot, and that brand and people just like have that loyalty to those particular people because they know they're always, whenever they tune into the stream, they're always going to get a good product.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I also say some games work better live. Like I'd argue Hearthstone, League of Legends full matches I think are more interesting live than watching VODs for 40 minutes.
I definitely agree on League. Hearthstone is a weird one because I'm still getting the biggest numbers on YouTube for Hearthstone, but I just don't know why because I'm bad. but you'll still watch it live. I think the Hearthstone in particular is good live because there's that period of time where you're not playing, where the chat can kind of interact with you, either suggest plays, backseat game like obnoxious idiots, or they can like vote for the next class or the next draft or anything like that. There's that degree of interactivity that you can really pull in there, and that helps a lot. But Hearthstone Content still does fairly well on YouTube, shockingly enough, and that really surprises me. I didn't think it would.
Yeah, and in comparison to like Magic the Gathering, Hearthstone is much simpler to understand, and like players do feel like when they're watching you, even if they haven't played that much, that they know what's going on and they could actually suggest moves to you that they know would make sense and stuff. So I think that's a big part of it.
It's a stupidly visual game in
Yeah.
comparison. Like, if you played Magic the Gathering online and its arcane interface that is about 20 years old, even though they just revamped it, even the way that Magic is designed, like Magic the Gathering is designed with phases, phases of gameplay. There's no phases of gameplay in Hearthstone. It's either your turn or the other dude's turn. That's it. There's nothing that's difficult to understand there. You can attack whenever you want, you draw at the start of the turn, you can play a spell whenever you want. There's no like, oh, I declare a block. No, you don't do that. Either you run into a taunt or you don't run into a taunt.
Exactly, yeah. I think the Magic is, it has way more rules and way more going on in terms of the phases and everything. And I actually enjoy the game more just because I think it's a little deeper. But I haven't really seen anyone do it well so that it's fun to watch too, with the possible exception of Day 9 and Spellslingers. I feel like it could catch on if it were properly explained, but I haven't really seen it done that well yet.
Well, I mean, you talked about the amount of editing involved in Spellslingers there as well. You know, the Geek and Sundry production team, when I did tabletop with them, there's like 25 people there who are not on camera.
Wow.
And that's a small production team. And they're doing all of that work and making that show happen. Spellslingers is probably a smaller team, but the amount of editing involved in that show, very high. And difficult for like just your average YouTuber to do. Not something you can really do, and even the in-game version is not very good to watch either, so that becomes a real problem.
And I think the fact that Hearthstone's new helps a lot of people feel like it's still accessible. I mean, like, I've been playing Magic since I was in high school, but every time I take a gap, I feel like I need a full remedial course on all the new rule sets, where it's like, at least with Hearthstone, you kind of feel like, all right, I'm in on the ground level, and I can sort of expand with it.
And just also the fact that there's way less cards in Hearthstone to learn. There's so many cards in Magic if you're trying to just start out and play. So
it's so good to get in on the ground floor when it comes to that stuff. I can't imagine 3-4 expansions in Hearthstone's going to be anywhere near as accessible as it currently is. It's just going to be ridiculously complicated. We still don't know how they're even going to do blocks, assuming they do. How's Arena Draft going to work when there's 2,000 cards to draft from? I don't know, but well, I guess we'll see when it comes.
Yeah.
So a lot of YouTubers made their mark in the FPS genre. What is it about FPSs that are so accessible for most people? And is it just the fact that it gives people more time to talk crap to each other?
I think, I mean, just as far as what's happening on the screen, it's much more visceral than other games. It's very in your face, and like I was saying before, it's very easy to understand. It's like, I got shot or I shot that guy, and there's not much else to it. It's also very easy to distinguish a good player from a bad player.
Right.
Whereas when you're watching a MOBA, maybe not as visually accessible, like, oh, that guy's extremely good at the game or not. you see a guy and he aims really well and he's got good strategy and positioning. Okay, I can understand that this is a very good player and he's good to watch.
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to see that guy's got good aim. Yeah, I mean, you even have a little hit confirm thing just to demonstrate. Yeah, he shot that guy. Here's a little thing that says Master Sergeant Shoot a Person for that. You know, it's Call of Duty in particular is really, really visual, and I think that even you can actually boil it down to basic mechanics, particularly with the earlier COD games. The idea of quick scoping is a very enjoyable thing to watch because it looks a hell of a lot more skillful than it actually is. But it looks really impressive. It's like, oh, we just pop that guy, then that guy, then that guy, all in the space of 3 seconds. That's really impressive. It's easy to make montages out of. You know, if Drowning Pool was getting royalties from Call of Duty videos, then they would be rolling in it right now. But it's weird to see that. I think. You know a lot more about this than I would, but it almost seems like the montage scene for COD has kind of died down a little bit, and it's turned into more, here's some good gameplay, and I'm going to talk about my day. And for some reason, I mean, people really seem to actually dig that. I'm not much of a competitive FPS player. I'm goddamn awful. But even when I do FPS footage just in the background, it seems to resonate better with people than it would be for some other game.
I wonder if that's because people are becoming more interested in kind of the talking over, or because COD is doing a lot of the same things over and over again, and people have become used to what's going on in the gameplay, and now they just want to hear something else.
Or maybe it's just this hilarious thing where it's like, this guy's so badass, he can just kill 30 people and be talking about his day. And,
and this is where we break the illusion, tell you Santa isn't real, and say most of that was done in post.
And I guess there's only so many times you can do a video talking about your sniper rifle and how much damage it does and what your loadout is and why you're running certain frag grenades.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think...
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that it also comes down to the fact that I think like Call of Duty in particular is now very well, it's figured out, you know, and when it wasn't, especially like when the original Black Ops came out and things kind of got shook up a little bit, there was a real market for, I'm going to talk for 20 minutes about this one gun, and I'm going to explain to you what the best perks to run with this gun are, so on and so forth. I think that less people are searching for tutorial content on COD now. So it's resulted in FPS-focused channels changing their way of recording because they still want to do FPS because they're good at it, but they can't do the same tutorial stuff and still pull in the same numbers.
Yeah, I think also some of personalities have been established. For example, Call of Duty with Drifter. He does really good weapon breakdowns, and like you just watch that video and you understand that gun, and that's it. Like you don't need to watch 5 other guys explain the weapon because he's done it. So.
Yeah, you're not going to go to 5 other channels and watch the same thing, are you?
Right.
You know, one guy's good enough.
my strategy when those videos were already out was to take the guns that nobody was using and then talk about how you could make those guns work.
Yeah.
That was like way back in the day.
I remember that. Guns you didn't think were good?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. That was funny.
How much of an audience do you think you lose when you aren't great at a game?
In my experience, none whatsoever. In fact, it's very beneficial sometimes.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's even better that you're bad, and especially like if it's a very competitive game, like I've actually gotten a way more positive response from Smite videos when I'm like, in the beginning, I'm like, I'm pretty new to this, like, as far as being competitive, give me tips in the comments of how I can be better, and you get so many comments of people, like, wanting to help you out and make you better at the game.
Yeah. In Call of Duty, I had a series called Riot Shield Man where I would just literally run around and bash people with the Riot Shield, and I was terrible, and it wasn't a good or viable strategy at all, but it was hilarious to watch, and I would explode a lot and stuff, and people seemed to like watching that. Whereas if I had tried to play and be good, it would have been less good.
Strangely enough, I think there's such an oversaturation of pro-level play now that we've seen even COD go into esports. Like, you want to watch pro-level COD, you can watch MLG and watch the best teams actually fight it out. So I think there's maybe less space for that. So people actually like to watch terrible people and feel better about themselves. They come home, like, they hate their boss, so they translate that hate onto you, you know, and you also get views from it, which is great. But I also think there's a market for everyman material. As long as you're interesting, it doesn't really matter how good you are, really. I think the biggest complaint people have is when you do 50 videos, you're visibly not improved up to episode 50. It's like, why are you still down here, you know? You should have learned by now, surely.
Yeah.
And also, I'd say if you're going to establish yourself as a personality who's a beast at FPS games, the bar is set that you need to play well, and you're not going to get away with bad games, and that kind of limits you.
Absolutely not. You know, if it was back at the start, maybe. You know, but I think you can get away with still being bad at Hearthstone because people haven't really figured it out yet. But in a couple of years, you try to get in there being bad at Hearthstone, no one's going to care. No one's going to watch it. But it's not all about skill. It is always going to be personality
totally.
first. If you are interesting and terrible and you can make that work together, particularly with a lot of self-deprecating humor or anything like that, you can pull in a lot of viewers that way.
There's actually, for Dota content, and he's one of the only people I've seen other than like Pyria and Flax that have been successful at being bad at Dota but also entertaining. There's this guy named Sir Action Slacks, and he does a series called I Make Funny Voices While I Play Dota 2, where he literally just like plays as the character, like talking over the mic the whole time. And sometimes his team hates it, and sometimes they like play along and love it. But it's really funny to watch, and he usually loses.
Do you think there's any way? I don't feel like MMO content is usually good filmable material.
It is absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
I
It's
got
more
my
streamer
start
friendly.
doing it, and it's terrible. I go back and watch my old stuff from 2010, Cataclysm, like, why did anyone watch this? This was just absolute dreck. You have to be super interesting to even engage people in that, because the actual content on the screen, boring as hell.
The very first MMO content I ever watched was like PvP content from WoW, and then also like the first guild to down this boss or whatever.
Yeah.
And those will do well. It's almost like trying to jump on a game to do the gameplay footage before everyone else. And like it's just like sort of that SEO thing where it's like we're the first ones to down this boss, and then that video will get a lot of views. But as far as the game actually being interesting to watch, it's not anywhere near as visceral or interesting as other games.
Yeah, definitely more friendly on Twitch, and for example, play a lot of Guild Wars 2, and the only time I'd watch Guild Wars 2 VOD content video on demand is when I was looking at like a class build, like, hey, I'm new to the game, what's a level 60 Mesmer like? And I just kind of watched that, I'm like, oh, cool, and that was it. Done.
I think it's an easy way to just sort of, like, if you needed your fix of playing WoW or something, to throw up a Twitch stream in the background and kind of watch someone running a raid without it being, like, your whole day, too. So I think it's certainly, like, the strength of it there. But other than that, it's, like, all of the worst problems you said about, like, farming. It's just, like, a game where it's just, like, no matter what you're doing, even in the context of, like, look at this raid around us, we're still clearing trash, except for, like, these moments of, like, excitement that happen periodically, you know, so...
Well, I think Guild Wars 2 is an interesting example, though, because it's kind of an action. There's action elements in there. There's dodging. There's running around.
Totally.
I mean, there's an actual movement going on in the game. I actually used to stream when I was trying to do the Halloween Tower, that
Yeah.
jumping puzzle. You know, finally finished it, jumped up and down, screamed, you know. So I think there's some good stuff there, but it's just rare. But I do think Guild Wars 2 is an interesting example because it has certain elements that I think do make for good watching.
Yeah.
But the great thing about Guild Wars 2 is also the community. It's a very friendly MMO.
Yeah, people are very accepting.
Yeah.
And I'd say if you're a Guild Wars 2 fan, then watch out for WildStar, because that also has that kind of action MMO movement,
Yeah.
all that. So,
That's where everyone seems to be going right
Yeah.
now with MMOs. They wanted to stop tying you to the floor with 3-second cast times and just make fighting a little bit more dynamic. And MMOs move so slowly when it comes to evolution of game mechanics because they usually started about 6 years before they come out. So by the time they come out, they're already dated. So I mean, you have Elder Scrolls coming along saying, look, we got first-person combat. Like, great. Does it feel anything like the Elder Scrolls games? Nope, not at all. It feels like, wow, from first-person perspective with a little bit of Guild Wars kind of thrown in there. But that's just how slow MMOs go. But watchability-wise, yeah, they're so hard to watch. You mentioned WoW PvP earlier, and that content was really difficult to understand if you didn't play a lot of WoW.
Yeah.
there's a lot going on.
Yeah, because it's like, well, I see his health bar going down, but I'm not entirely sure why. A bunch of abilities just went off, and he just exploded. Well, that looked nice, but why did that happen?
It was easier to understand in vanilla, but nowadays it's ridiculous.
Jeez, yeah, that's... Now, I don't even know what half those abilities are anymore. I watch WoW videos every now and again to remind me why I don't play WoW anymore.
But I think, like these guys are saying, it's way more friendly for a stream audience because you'll tune into a video on YouTube and it's like, this video is 30 minutes long. I definitely don't have time to watch this guy farm for 30 minutes. Whereas it's like, oh, I want to watch WoW for a couple minutes. You can tune in, he's doing whatever, and then you can tune out whenever you want.
I think there's less expectation of quality when it comes to a stream as well. There could just be hours of boring stuff because it's running all day, you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of people just have it on in the background,
Yeah.
and they don't pay that much attention to it. But you cannot get away with that on YouTube because there will be someone who has done the exact piece of content way, way better than you.
Yep.
And I think that you can get away with MMOs and of course stuff like League and Dota very much on Twitch.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting what you say too about like the sort of the slow cycles of MMOs too, where in a lot of ways like people are still always perpetuating the same old things, and like in some ways like World of Warcraft when they kind of got rid of their old talent tree system was like at a time when everyone else was like, look, here's our new talent trees, here's how we're going to do this, and it's like, well, why does that still have to even exist? Just like make like, you know, choose from 3 meaningful choices or whatever. So it's, I don't know, I guess I'm just sort of interested in asking you guys like why you think those tenets have been upheld for so long, and like why don't they feel like you can take more risks with stuff like that?
More risks with
Like why does Elder Scrolls Online have to, like you say, feel like World of Warcraft from however long ago?
I think it's just development cycles and cost, mostly. You need only look at the Old Republic as just the most expensive game ever made, and the fact that it just didn't do all that well. And that was a game that barely took any risks.
Yeah.
Right? That was a game that that literally copied the warrior skills from World of Warcraft and gave you a lightsaber to do them with, and thought that that was okay. And you would think, oh, familiarity is good in a new universe. That was their theory, and we're going to put some voice acting in. It's going to be great. And it didn't resonate with people. And then there's been plenty of other games that have said, we're going to depart from the norm completely, and again bombed. MMOs are so risky to do, and they take so long that there's this weird situation where I imagine some part of the company is saying, we have got to evolve, we have got to differentiate, because otherwise we'll die. And then everyone says, no, you can't. This is tried and true. This is proven. You can't do that. We'll fail if we change too much, because people will be alienated by it. And then you've got CCP just sitting on the back giggling all the entire way. It's like, we made a spreadsheet entertaining.
Yeah.
I think with games like WoW, like their success sort of stemmed, I mean, other than the fact that it was like one of the best design MMOs when it came out,
True.
I think their success stems from the fact that they already had a lore that people were really connected to, that they could get in on, and like Star Wars, I think, wanted to play off of that more. But it's really hard to make an MMO with no pre-existing lore where you're just like, here's our story, and then like people want to play. And then I think the focus is more on the mechanics at that point, because no one's really connected to the characters or anything.
Yeah,
That's so true.
Yeah.
Like all of the memories of Warcraft 3, you know, that was just like every expansion. It's like, oh, of course you're excited to go fight the Lich King. Of course you're excited to go, you know, to whatever. But yeah.
So what about fighting games?
I love watching them.
Yeah.
For the sheer fact that I could never pull off any of the combos and the combos that people figure out and the infinite things, and like Marvel vs. Capcom 3, I love watching it, but I could never play that game against anyone because it's just insanity.
Yeah, there are no mediocre people in fighting games.
No.
You're either awesome, king of the world, or you're getting slaughtered every time. There's very little middle ground. The only one I really like to do is like Smash Brothers, because, and with items on, not, you know, Final Destination, no items off, serious mode. I like items on because even if I suck, you know, maybe a hammer will drop next to me or something, and I'll pound someone in the face, and they'll be like, you didn't deserve that kill. I'll be like, no, I didn't, but I got it anyway.
To be fair, if you wanted to deserve kills, you probably should have been playing Smash Brothers in the first
Yeah,
place.
exactly. It's a casual game.
And, well, the funny thing about Smash Brothers is that the competitive end of Smash Brothers is really, really high skill. I watched it at
insane.
EVO, and
It's hardcore.
that and there's a documentary, I think, called The Smash Brothers. Incredible watch. Like, it's on YouTube. Everyone should watch
That's
it.
like a 6-part series, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It's just awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, if Free-to-Play hadn't just come out, I'd say it's easily the best esports documentary ever made.
Yeah.
Now it's only the second best, but it's still worth watching.
Yeah, totally.
But it's interesting you should mention Marvel vs. Capcom 3. That's probably the least watchable fighting game that exists in the
Well,
universe.
it's one of those things where you watch it and there's a lot of flashing colors and you're like, ooh. Yeah, I mean, if you're actually trying to understand what's going on, it's hopeless.
Yeah, I'd say like Street Fighter 4 is still probably one of the most watchable, and I think you can very easily understand what's going on. But strangely enough, for fighting games, I think fighting games currently have a problem with commentators. A lot of the commentators at those fighting game events, because it's a very grassroots kind of community, are just either pro players or people who kind of know what they're talking about. There's not that many professional commentators. And for a new audience, it's really hard to figure out. These guys will actually sit there for 30 seconds and not say anything, which for any other esport would never happen. And they often don't explain the basics.
Yeah, you
and
have
they
to-
use terminology that doesn't make any sense to people.
You have to watch where it's like, oh, he missed the confirm. Oh, he didn't punish that move. And you're just like, what are you
that was a
talking
meaty.
about?
That was a meaty.
Yeah.
Like, that was a what? It's like, oh, well, he just performed a cross-up. I don't know what you're talking about. It can be difficult to watch, which is weird, because you think fighting games would be the most easy to watch. It's a guy punching another guy in the face. That's not difficult to figure out, surely.
I'm just as happy watching like salty bets when it comes to like fighting. Like, I mean, that did it for me. I don't need the commentary is exactly how you describe it for me. So
Yeah,
When it comes to solely about the real game's the chat.
the only
Yeah,
fighting
that's
games
true.
I'll watch is Smash Brothers, just because it's relatable to me. I've played it before. I kind of understand what's going on, but these guys, the shield canceling and the invincible frames and all that, that's definitely a higher level than what I'd invest. But yeah, fighting games don't really do it for me.
I think what it comes down to is like, I really like fighting games, but I've never taken the time to really get good at them. So when I watch these people that have devoted hours and hours on working on the same combos over and over again, and then seeing how impressive that is when they time everything out, it's just really cool to see.
Yeah, that's my problem with getting into a fighting game is I don't want to always put that work into,
Yeah.
developing strings of combos and stuff. I just want to play a game and have fun instantly, and that's why, I would rather watch fighting games than learn to play one, or actually, get good enough to actually be good at a fighting game.
Yeah, and honestly, on YouTube in particular, there aren't that many really big fighting game channels. There's not even close to anything like the other genres of games, and most average players can't just start playing a fighting game as a series and have anyone care. The only reason they will go and watch it is if like they're really, really bad at it. Like if let's say the champion of the world, Darkside Phil, for instance, if they're that bad at the game, you'll watch it because you want to see him get pissed off and blame bugs for the fact that he's terrible. And that's not really a good business strategy, and you can't really pull that off if you are your average Joe everyday kind of player. And fighting games are not impressive to watch if you're not very good at them.
Yeah.
So you just become like the court jester. It's not really what you want. You don't want to be the village idiot of YouTube. That position's already filled anyway.
So probably one of the most challenging genres of games are going to be story-driven games. Is there a good way to capture a story game without just completely subverting your personality while you're playing it? How can you make stuff where the characterization is so important, but at the same time you're trying to comment over it and dominate it?
I think PewDiePie is sort of the example of the guy that mastered that, and it's just kind of reacting to the stuff that's happening in the story while keeping a balance of not talking over important stuff.
Yeah.
And I think he's sort of the one to look to about like how you really do a Let's Play without ruining it.
That said, he did focus a lot on stuff that wasn't story-driven, and when he did do things that were story-driven, like Heavy Rain, it was insufferable. And it happens with a lot of people when you're dealing with any story-driven kind of experience. There's the guys that voice acted these cutscenes are accomplished voice actors that spent weeks and weeks and weeks on end in a studio getting those lines just perfect. So don't blabber over them. And when it comes to story-driven games in particular, I think it's the hardest to justify from most perspectives that you're kind of making a video about it.
Yeah.
I think if it's a competitive game, you can very easily inject your personality into that and actually create a really fun experience. But let's say you're talking over BioShock Infinite. What can you add? What can you add to that? And what kind of reactions do you have that would be interesting? A lot of the really good single-player Let's Plays that mostly I come from the Something Awful forums are from people that have mastered the game, have played they've beaten it like 20 times, and they have so much interesting things to add. I recommend to everyone, when you go home, check out some guy called Research Indicates. He did a Let's Play of an awful Jurassic Park game called Trespasser. But he spent a lot of time, he researched that game, he knows everything about the history of the company, how the game compares to the films, he even puts film clips to demonstrate things in there. And he goes through the whole thing, and it's almost like watching a history documentary.
Yeah.
And I find that really valuable. I think that's a very enjoyable thing to watch.
Yeah, I think you had a good point on saying that it was good when they did this terrible game because, like you said, if you're talking over BioShock Infinite, no one wants to hear that because the story in BioShock Infinite is so good and it's like a masterwork. But if you find a really terrible game with a really cheesy story, and you talk over that and point out how cheesy and terrible it is, and are able to make jokes about it, then you found a story-driven game that you can actually use.
Yeah, you become Mystery Science Theater 3000 at that point, that's a totally viable way. Just riffing on bad games is definitely a viable way of doing it, but the biggest challenge is not to put yourself first in a game that some massive team has spent 3+ years working on their narrative masterwork, and you come in and blabber over your little Logitech headset.
Yeah.
You're trying to... be respectful, I suppose. I think is maybe the most important thing I'd ever say about that. Just be respectful to the medium and just try and kind of be a companion along for the journey instead of the focus of the video.
Yeah, I think I saw a video recently on Machinima, actually. It was worst FPS ever, where the main character's name was Blade, and they were...
Yeah, it was like Sin episodes or whatever.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sin episodes?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and it was...
That never got finished. It was so terrible.
Yeah, it was terrible, but it was hilarious to watch.
Yeah, Inside Gaming, it was just like the enemies like willing themselves to die, like shooting barrels themselves to kill themselves. And yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that was a perfect example. I agree. That little series of just like what a weird game, but like it was just begging to like be explored. So
Yeah.
I think the way Two Best Friends do it is pretty good as well. I think if you're going to take a narrative experience and you want to make something funny, like start to go edit heavy and don't just say, here's my 50-part series on this. Do a game, cut it to the points where maybe the game is even duller, you know, like just cut the cutscenes out entirely and just kind of do a montage, do a clip show of all your funny moments, put it together, then move on to the next title. If you ever do a Let's Play of a single-player game, you just have to be really, really careful with it. Especially the people that really like that game. If you even put a word over one of those cutscenes, they're going to have your head. They're going to hunt you down.
Yeah, I mean, if you talk over The Walking Dead, the game, when like Clem is doing whatever, I'll punch you in the face. So.
You might as well just quit YouTube right now if you do that.
So, are there any, we'll take some questions in just a few minutes. Are there any games that in particular you've noticed Let's Plays on and you've been like, why did you do that? What on earth were you thinking?
Every horror game ever.
I would say like NBA, whatever game would be, like following the person's career, where it's basically just that person playing the NBA game and just like playing their guy, or like FIFA, for example. Like that's, I don't know.
You know, and the sad thing is I think you can make that very interesting if you tried. It's just, if you presented that kind of like an ESPN style thing and you edited it together properly and you made basically an alternate timeline with this, like the worst player in history becomes this super sports star.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is just them blithering on about the game they're playing.
Episode 44, and then, oh, I'm playing the Clippers this time, and now the Lakers. And I'd say those are probably the worst, in my opinion, of Let's Plays. So.
Yeah.
I agree with you. The talking over sort of a narrative experience, where they're clearly not having respect for, you know what I mean, of just like here's a shared experience of maybe someone couldn't get this game or just wanted someone to depict it like a shared experience. Just disrespect for that is really hard to stomach for me personally. So
it doesn't do us any favors either, does it? Like from a copyright perspective in particular,
right.
Because YouTube will just become a place where publishers look at it. It's like these guys just trying to make money off the backs of our game, and they're not respectful to it. They just blither on. Their production quality is terrible. We're going to come down on everybody, and then that's just not a good thing to do.
Now you did mention horror games though, and that you don't think they make good Let's Plays.
That's just a personal opinion. That's just because I hate everyone that does it. Like, it's not. They actually make great Let's Plays because they spawned the reaction LP, the scare cam LP, which I think may be the worst thing to ever happen to YouTube. But they're still very successful. So I'm obviously wrong. There's definitely a demographic that loves to watch that kind of stuff. Totally. Yeah. And I think there is definitely value in reactions. That's an example of where, I ask, where can you add value to the game? Well, people are not watching for the horror experience. They're watching to see you horrified by the horror experience.
And a lot of people like to watch other people get scared at the same things that they got scared
at. Yeah.
So they want to, like, oh, I didn't react that bad.
Yeah.
You guys way more worse than I am.
Yeah, I mean, you're sharing the experience with that person then.
Yeah, definitely. And you can't argue with the numbers on that stuff. There's become a lot of imitators, but at the end of the day, like PewDiePie's numbers can't really be argued with. And he wasn't the first to do scare cam, but he definitely popularized it to the point it's at now. And I personally can't stand watching it, but plenty of people can, so it's definitely a valid form of doing it.
Yeah, a lot of people.
There's good schadenfreude there. It's just like the night that the really poignant Game of Thrones episodes come out, I drink up the internet. I go through Twitter and I watch everyone's misery and
especially
sadness.
if you read ahead. It's like, I know exactly what's going to happen. This is going to be delicious. Just get the popcorn out, open up Twitter, just let it scroll, man. Let it scroll.
That Red Wedding was...
Does anybody have any questions? Feel free to just come on up to the microphone if you have any questions about games that are fun to play versus fun to watch.
Any Sandbox games like Minecraft or Gmod? Just vanilla, no mods or mini games. How would you pull that off?
For me, it comes down to the personality, and it's not so much of that person being good or bad at the game. It's just I have to like the person, and they have to be interesting. I mean, that's how I will watch.
Yeah, I think the main thing, especially with like a Minecraft, is like 90% of the game you're just hitting blocks, so you have to be interesting in the meantime while that's happening.
Yeah, or edit very heavily. Or fast forward through the actual building to show the actual completion of whatever you were building.
Yeah.
That helps a lot.
Edit. It was the same when I was doing WoW stuff. When I was doing the quests, I just cut out the runtimes because why would anyone want to see that? And what can I even say that's valuable? When Minecraft was first in alpha, I think most people could get away with, here was my first night. Oh, aren't creepers scary? That kind of thing. You can't do that anymore. It's too played out. And if you're just doing vanilla Minecraft, I think it's very difficult to execute a really well-done series unless you have a concept in mind. I think the reason why the Yogscast got so successful is they started doing vanilla, and then they branched out, and suddenly it wasn't just them playing Minecraft, it was a story that was evolving, and there was like people wanted to find out what happened next.
Yeah.
And they evolved a narrative. They created a story of their own. And Sandbox Games can potentially be some of the most creative games you could ever make a video about. Simultaneously, they can be some of the most boring videos you'll ever see.
Totally.
It just depends how good you are at it.
I think also you can take some certain Sandbox games and twist them on their head by trying to play them in a way other than they were meant to be played.
Yeah.
It's an example that I like was the guy who he did a blog where he tried to be I forgot it, but he tried to be an NPC.
Okay.
In a Elder Scrolls game. And so he had to eat every day, he had to spend every night in a bed, he wasn't allowed to fight because he was an NPC, he wouldn't live. So he tried to play the game in a way and make money and live, and I think that would be very entertaining nowadays.
Steam sells Desert Gunner. My favorite video you've made at Total Biscuit, if I was going to share anything, is those kind of videos from you. How do those kind of videos compare to the other content you have kind of in general? And I know there's a problem with that sort of stuff on Steam lately, and I know we've heard a lot about it from you. Do you know if there's any kind of plans in motion to actually try to address this?
It's an interesting game to bring up because that is neither fun to play nor fun to watch. But, strangely enough, playing really, really bad games is extremely appealing to people. Because, one, we mentioned Schadenfreude with horror games. Same with bad games. People love to watch you suffer through something. And there's a lot of enjoyment to be had there. They also love to see, just how bad gaming can really get without them personally having to experience it and take the hit on the wallet. I maybe think there's less value to it because I almost feel like I'm kind of kicking a puppy. It's like, this is a defenseless, terrible little game that it didn't mean to be. It's just awful, and I think that you can go too far. Strangely enough, I used to do a little series called Why Do I Own, whereby I went back through my Steam back catalog where I had hundreds of games I'd never played that I was like, what is this? And I went into it, and I usually just riffed on it, and people actually hated it. They didn't like it at all. It's like, you're being too mean. You can actually go too far in that regard. I definitely think there's lots of channels that do really bad games, and they riff on them, but you've got to be very careful with where you draw the line there. And you've also got to make sure it's funny and you're not just nitpicking at it.
Yeah. I think playing bad games is another one where editing is super important because there are parts of the game that are just bad and no one likes to watch them because they're bad. But if you edit in the parts that are really funny because they're bad, then that's where you have success.
I would definitely agree with that. Just playing 20 minutes of a bad game is generally not good entertainment.
Yeah.
My question is about Happy Wheels, and I see YouTubers making 100-long series about it and 20 minutes long episodes. Is it really that fun to play? Because it doesn't look like it'd be very fun.
I guess it's more that there's always new maps, and that's, in my opinion, more personality-driven content. Like watching the game, just, oh, that might be a funny death here, you got really close, and then you died stupidly, but it's the personality that carries that game, and they can just keep going because there's always new maps, new things to do, and new characters. And
I mean, they really like money as well. And those videos made a huge amount of it. And for some reason, there is a massive audience for that game. I think it's probably died off a bit now. Yeah. Certainly around the time when Toby Games was making about 5,000 of them a day, I think it was going very well for him. I know Uber Hacks on Over did a lot of them. PewDiePie did a lot of them. There are just certain games that involve, again, it's the Schadenfreude thing. It's quite a hard game. It's not actually that fun to watch. And kind of like QWOP, as well. It's something where you want to see someone else suffer through it.
Octodad.
Which is why I'm surprised that probably archery hasn't had the same effect, because that is misery in a can. Oh, Lord. It may be one of the most difficult games I've ever seen. I guess I've just given you a suggestion to try it. Don't.
Yes, Surgeon Simulator, excuse me, is another good one that I really like. That's just fun to mess around, and it's hard to be good at that game, I think.
Yeah. I find Surgeon Simulator to be way more fun than Happy Wheels.
Oh, totally.
I don't know why. It just feels like it feels. It's more fun. It's more of a visceral experience where I'm like, if you're playing Happy Wheels, you're like, stuff is happening. When you're playing Surgeon Simulator, it's like, wow, I'm doing stuff to this person.
Yeah, it's like you can rage at the game, but also be having fun.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was
The
super
police will be
excited.
waiting outside after the show to take you away.
If there's any profilers out there, they're like,
I was super excited when I found the TF2 secret as well. I was like, oh, this is so
oh,
awesome.
yeah. Surgeon Simulator is great.
Yep.
But, I mean, is there even an explanation as to why Happy Wheels got as popular as it did? Or is it just one of those weird phenomenon, I suppose?
Yeah.
It's a screamy game. People screamed while they were playing it. It's just like a horror game, to me at least.
Yeah, and it was, I guess it was the overblown reactions that a lot of people had. It's like, oh, I died, how could this be? Well, probably because the game's designed to do that.
Yeah.
Probably, but never mind.
Yeah.
Do you think like games like Pokemon, where like it's essentially the same thing like throughout, no matter like what they add, no matter what they do you think like it's better to play until people start adding like Nuzlocke, and until that makes it like kind of better to watch because there's more to lose when you're doing Nuzlocke?
I have no idea what that is.
What is
it?
a Nuzlocke?
Yeah, it's like basically there's like a bunch of rules. So I think there's like one rule where like if your Pokemon faints, like it dies, and you have to set it free, and you have to like name each one so that you.
Is
get,
that an
like,
in-game thing, or is that just rules that you apply to yourself?
Yeah, rules that you apply to yourself.
Okay, all right. I think that, I mean, one, that's definitely a way to do it, but secondly, edit, you know, on that stuff. Because like you said, Pokemon is incredibly repetitive. Run into a bush, something attacks you, you have 4 moves or whatever. You keep doing that, and you've got to pick the interesting moments. Let's take Twitch Plays Pokemon as a great example of something that was not in any way fun to watch, like horrible to watch, but everything that sprung up around it, people created either video content or fan art or songs around it. That's what actually became interesting. It created its own mythos.
Yeah.
I think that applies to it can apply to any playthrough that has a lot of that downtime, where nothing's really going on.
Yeah.
The entertainment doesn't come from watching that.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with Pokemon, I don't think, Twitch Plays. There were people genuinely trying to beat the game, and then there were trolls that wanted to keep checking the Helix fossil 8,000 times or whatever, and people were there to see that struggle, not necessarily the game.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Flappy Bird.
Oh, Jesus.
Why do people even make videos of that?
Rage.
Yeah.
Rage. It's the rage reaction videos, I think. It's a very hard game that's very simple to understand, and it got very popular, and those are like the 3 key things that make something kind of go viral. Pretty much for all of 5 minutes. Flappy Bird actually died out mercifully quickly, and I'm happy to see that. I don't want to see any people that I respect dress up as chickens ever again. Like, if that could stop happening, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, it's
But-
the same.
yeah.
It's the same reason people play like Unfair Mario and that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. It's just like
Rage.
to see people's rage reactions.
Yeah, 99% of which is completely overacted and not genuine in any way, but people do enjoy watching that nonetheless. You know, it's dumb entertainment.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah, I guess like sometimes I'll watch KSI. He's a big UK FIFA player, and I pretty much just like watching him because he'll smash a controller on the ground when he loses or they score a goal. His reactions carry the video. So yeah, personality.
Yeah, it's a village idiot syndrome once again. It's like, look at how dumb he's being, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we're pretty much out of time. I'm sorry we're not going to be able to take any more questions. But everybody give a hand for our panel.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And I hope you're having a good time at the expo, and we'll see you soon.